There is something I wish someone had told me 60 years ago, and I have spent the last decade wondering why no one did. My name is Arthur, and I am 96 years old, and the thing I am about to tell you is the most honest thing I have said out loud in a very long time. I was not a careless man. I want you to understand that before I say anything else. I paid my bills on time. I showed up to work every single day for 41 years without once calling in sick unless I truly was. I raised 3 children, buried a wife, kept a garden, read the newspaper every morning with my coffee before the sun had finished rising. By most measures, I was a disciplined, responsible, functioning human being. And yet, somewhere in the middle of all that order and routine, I developed a habit so quiet, so invisible, so entirely ordinary looking that I never once thought to question it. And that habit, over the course of decades, did something to my mind that I am only now beginning to fully understand. I stopped being curious. Not all at once. That is the part that makes it so dangerous. It did not happen the way a man falls off a cliff. It happened the way a river slowly dries up in a drought, so gradually that you do not notice until one afternoon you look down and realize the riverbed is just dust and cracked stone, and you cannot remember the last time you heard the sound of water. When I was young, I wanted to know everything. I remember being maybe 8 or 9 years old and asking my father why the sky changed color at sunset, and he told me it had something to do with the light bending, and that answer was not enough for me. I went to the library the following Saturday and I sat there for 2 hours reading about it until I understood it well enough to explain it to my younger sister. That was just who I was. Questions were not a bother to me, they were a pleasure. In my 20s and 30s, I was still that way to some degree. I was curious about people, about their lives, about how things worked. I would meet someone at a dinner party and I genuinely wanted to know where they came from and what they thought about things. I read books that were not related to my work, history mostly, but also some science, some biography. I remember reading a long book about the construction of the Panama Canal and being completely absorbed by it for 3 weeks, talking about it with my wife Elaine at the dinner table, looking things up when a word or a reference confused me. But then something shifted. I cannot give you a precise year because it did not have a precise year. What I can tell you is that at some point my days became so full of the same things repeated in the same order that there was simply no room left in them for wondering. I had my routine, I had my job, I had my responsibilities, and when I was not doing those things I was tired, and when I was tired I wanted to rest, not to think. The questions stopped coming and I did not go looking for them. I stopped reading things that challenged me and started reading things that confirmed what I already believed. I stopped asking people real questions and started having the same 4 or 5 conversations on rotation. How's work? How are the kids? Can you believe this weather? I stopped sitting with a problem long enough to actually turn it over and look at it from a different angle. If something confused me, I let it go instead of following it. If a topic came up that I did not know much about, I nodded along instead of admitting I was lost and asking someone to explain it. And for a long time, none of this felt like a loss. It felt like efficiency. It felt like a man who had done the hard work of learning and could now simply live from the knowledge he had already accumulated. That is how I thought of it, if I thought of it at all. I had earned a kind of intellectual rest. What I did not understand was that the brain does not work like a savings account. You cannot make large deposits when you are young and then live off the interest forever. The brain is more like a muscle, and I was allowing mine to slowly atrophy without once feeling the burn of it, because the decline was so slow and the routine was so comfortable. I noticed the first signs in my late 60s, though I did not recognize them for what they were at the time. I would lose words. Not constantly, not in a way that alarmed me, but more often than I used to. I would be telling a story, and the exact right word would simply not be there, and I would have to reach around it and describe the thing without naming it. I told myself it was tiredness. I told myself everyone my age experienced this. I told myself it was normal. It was in my 70s, after Elaine passed, that I found myself with something I had not had in decades: time. Real, unstructured time with no obligations pressing against it. And I remember sitting in that house with the television off and the quiet pressing in. And I picked up a book I had been meaning to read for years, a history of the Byzantine Empire that a friend had given me, and I opened it and started to read. It took me almost a full page to realize I had not retained a single sentence. I went back to the beginning. I read it again, slowly, and this time I held on to it better, but it required an effort that shocked me. Not the effort of a man learning something genuinely difficult, but the effort of a man who had let a basic capacity rust from years of neglect. The effort of trying to start a car that had been sitting in a field for too long. That was the moment I understood what I had done to myself. Over the years that followed, I tried to undo some of it. I started doing things that embarrassed me a little, because they were things that younger people do. I signed up for a class at the community center. Just a history class, nothing grand. I started working on language exercises in a little workbook, the kind designed for people who had experienced strokes. I took up chess badly and late. I started asking questions again, real ones, the kind where you actually wait for the answer and then ask another question from there. Some of it helped. My daughter told me I seemed sharper in my 80s than I had in my late 60s, and I believed her because I felt it too. Not the same as being young, nothing like that, but better than the plateau I had been sitting on for so long. More present in conversations, less likely to drift. But here is the thing I want you to understand, and this is the reason I'm talking to you today, whoever you are, whatever age you are sitting at right now. The years I spent in that comfortable, uncurious routine are not years I can get back. The connections I did not make, the ideas I did not follow, the conversations I let stay shallow when they could have gone deep, those are gone. And the capacity I allowed to soften during those decades did not fully return when I started working at it again. You can slow the decline, you can even reverse some of it, but you cannot go back to where you would have been if you had simply kept going. I think about the 8-year-old who sat in a library on a Saturday afternoon because one answer was not enough. I think about him with something that is not quite sadness but lives near it. He understood something instinctively that the adult he became forgot entirely, which is that the mind needs to be fed, not just used. Curiosity is not a luxury or a personality trait some people have and others do not. It is a practice, and like any practice, it weakens when you abandon it. I am 96 years old. I still play chess, still badly. I still read, though slower than I would like. I still ask questions, and I have noticed that people seem a little surprised when an old man is genuinely interested in what they think. That surprise tells me how rare it has become. If I could sit across from you right now, I would not give you advice. I am old enough to know that advice is almost never what a person actually needs. But I would tell you this one thing quietly, the way you tell someone something that matters. Do not let comfort talk you out of curiosity. The habit of not wondering feels like rest. It is not rest. It is a slow and very quiet kind of erosion, and you will not feel it happening, which is exactly what makes it so hard to stop. I felt it only when it was already very late. You still have time to feel it now.